Want to improve your marketing? You need to unleash your primal brain. Today's guest, Tim Ash, is bringing the heat. He's the author of Unleash Your Primal Brain and done some really incredible things over his time here on Earth. For about 2 decades, he was the CEO and co-founder of Site Tuners. Let me tell you something. Tim knows marketing. He's worked with companies from Yahoo to Costco to Autodesks to Nespresso. Like, the list is just enormous. Norton Coach, the list goes on and on and on. And that's because Tim understands that we don't make decisions based on logic and reason. We make decisions based on emotion. And that's, my friends, what today's episode is all about. Now, I know a lot of the listeners here are interested in creating podcasts, growing creative brands and businesses. And you gotta understand that every single person now is a digital marketer. If you're gonna get your idea to spread, you need to understand how to speak to people and how to bring people into your story, into your atmosphere. And so in today's episode, we're hitting on a bunch of topics that are gonna be very relevant. The most important one, and we spend a lot of time talking about storytelling. This is the reality. Most people aren't going to remember anything that you say, but they will remember the way you make them feel. And the way to make people really understand you is through the art of storytelling. This is not something you just pick up like that. It takes time. But there's a reason why the most powerful and engaging speakers and leaders are in the positions that they are. It, my friend, is because of the power of storytelling. And so today we're going to stay in that space a little while. We're going to talk about the hero's journey, the origin myth. We're going to talk about knowing your audience and how to navigate and tell the right stories to the right audiences. This is a really, really great show, and you're really going to like it. Make sure you hit subscribe. If you haven't yet, hit subscribe, leave a 5-star review. That means a lot. And I also want to encourage you, you don't need to go into this whole podcasting game alone. You really need to have support. I've got an amazing community that's really going to help you to avoid the burnout, to avoid the problems that comes with podcasting, like loneliness. If you're not getting the downloads that you want, there's probably some things that you need to fix. With the Podcast Savant network, with our community, you get community support, you get resources, education, accountability, promotional options. There's just a lot of really cool stuff. So don't go it alone. Join the Podcast Savant community today. We would love to have you. And in fact, this month, we're really focusing on storytelling. We're really focusing in on it. So I hope that you'll join us and start getting the resources you need, start getting the downloads you need. Avoid burnout, avoid a dead show. Join us. Okay, with all of that out of the way, let's get into this awesome episode with Tim Ash, and let's unleash your primal brain. Tim, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much, Mark. I'm very happy to be with you.
Yeah, me as well. You came highly recommended by someone I have a lot of respect for, Julian Espinoza. And I remember when he linked us up, he's like, Mark, Tim has got the most compelling information. You have to get him on your show. And I said, okay, if Julian vouches, then Tim, you're good to come on the show and chat, right?
Yeah, I was just on his growth hack podcast recently. It was a blast. Yeah.
I love it. Well, I really want to get into this because your book, Unleash Your Primal Brain, is pretty interesting. As podcasters, as creators, as digital marketers, you have to have an understanding of psychology. And I get this question from time to time. Hey, Mark, where should I run my ads? How do I do social media? How can I get more traffic? And the answer is it depends on your audience, right?
Absolutely.
So tell me,
sorry, go ahead.
Well, just give me a little more info here. Tell me, how does understanding the human brain and understanding your audience, how does that impact our decisions when it comes to marketing?
Well, I ran a digital marketing agency that was focused on what's called conversion rate optimization for over 20 years. And that's basically making websites and landing pages more effective. So once your audience gets there, how do you influence them to act? And we created 1.2 billion in value for companies like Google and Nestle and Siemens and Expedia and so on. And most of that was based on durable neuromarketing principles. In other words, understanding evolutionary psychology and how the brain really works and why we're really irrational and how we really make decisions. That's the basis of all marketing or persuasion, leadership, or really anything. So that's where we got a lot of durable value. I know a lot of internet marketers focus on the tactical and the practical and the measurable because we can, but the insights about how to do things right really come from influencing people at a much more fundamental level. So I think any good marketer should have evolutionary psychology as their foundational discipline.
Yeah, you mentioned the word irrational, and I'm thinking like, no, we make decisions irrationally. I thought we were all just perfectly logical, factual, making decisions based on all of the available data. Irrational, like who would have thunk?
No, joking aside, the chapter 1 in my book is actually about the big lie. And I don't mean Trump's big lie. I mean the one about the fact that we make rational decisions. People don't. In fact, we're unable to make rational decisions. The conscious part of the brain, all it does is provide us with options. It says, this is possible, this is possible, this is possible. Prioritizing them comes from our subconscious, the part that doesn't have access to language. And so basically, we're making decisions with our subconscious and then rationalizing it after the fact with our conscious brain. But the decision is made based on fear and pain avoidance, or upside and chasing happiness or some kind of rewards. Basically, we're pulled between loss and gain, and those are the things that really motivate us. But to prioritize that, we have to have an emotional component. If I feel strongly about something, that becomes the most actionable thing for me. And if I don't feel strongly about it, I'm probably going to ignore it, which is what the brain's really good at. It conserves energy. It's just on standby most of the time. And the answer to most changes in the world out there is do nothing.
Well, pain avoidance, super, super important. So, tell me, because it seems to me like a lot of people are selling benefits, right? Join my group, buy my product, and you'll get ABC. But correct me if I'm wrong, that's maybe not the most effective way to tap into that emotional part of the brain, right?
Yeah, well, it's happiness is one side of it, but you're absolutely right. We're threat based. I mean, dealing with the bear charging at you is more important than figuring out, or taking my time eating this berry, which is super sweet and makes me happy, right? So I have to deal with the bear. I don't have to eat the berry this second. So we're about 2 to 2.5 times more biased towards threats and negative information than we are towards positive stuff. So yeah, you can use upside to motivate me, but usually it's best to use negative stuff, sometimes in combination with upside, to create this big stark contrast. So here's life before my solution, and that's negative, really, really painful. And here's life after my solution or product or service, and that's, just wonderful, angels and choirs singing and stuff like that. So you want to use both to create contrast, but the most powerful by far is negativity. Let me give you a quick example. You've probably seen some kind of tooth whitening product on TV, and they usually in the commercial, they have that white teeth and that little bling effect, like, oh, you have shiny white teeth. That's not how I'd sell tooth whitening. I'd say more something along the lines of, do you have embarrassing yellow teeth? Are you afraid to open your mouth and smile? Do you have resting bastard face? Are you going to die alone? And the only way people are going to know it is after a few weeks, your decomposing body in your apartment makes a stench. Okay, that is rubbing salt into the wound. The value of solving my yellow teeth problem just went up a lot.
This reminds me of some of the YouTube videos that pop up in my feed. This guy, props to you, man, whoever you are out there, but it's like, did you know the average adult has 5 pounds of toxic poop in your system? And I was like, what?
In their gut, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, okay, how do I get this toxic poop out of my system? I got to get it out, right? Yeah. But it's funny you mentioned this juxtaposition, Tim. One of the best books that I read last year was Story Brand by Donald Miller. And he really points this out in, when you're developing your story, when you're developing your narrative, it's great to identify the hero. And in marketing terms, that's whoever's watching your ad or landing on your ad or listening, right?
Yeah, it's not you or your company. Absolutely.
Right. You're identifying the viewer. Again, this is marketing terms, but then you identify the problem that they have. This is exactly right. So the next phase in Donald's equation is, you're the hero. You have a significant problem, then you meet a mentor, right? Or someone who guides you into a solution. Okay. And then once he presents, once that you've presented the solution, you call them to action and you say, in order to avoid pain and achieve the greatness that you desire, right? So he kind of goes through this
Yeah.
this storytelling. So I'm curious if you have thoughts on that in, the proper
Yeah,
time.
absolutely. I mean, so my first thought is, duh, it's obvious. And the reason is, I mean, because, yeah, I don't know this guy and he's applying it to marketing or storytelling, but this is as old as time itself. It's a form of storytelling called the hero's journey. And it's the Odyssey, it's Star Wars, and it's everything in between. It was basically like life was good, something bad happened. I had to go on a quest. Along there, the way I picked up some unexpected allies and overcame some problems, and then there's a climax, and I slayed the dragon, and then there's a regreening of the earth. That is the hero's journey. That is the most canonical storytelling form ever. So yeah, if you're going to wrap your marketing in stories, use the hero's journey and use it properly. So absolutely, 100% on board with that.
Yeah, I'd love that. And, I've become somewhat obsessed with stories because when I started reading this concept of the hero's journey, and you start to see it pop up everywhere, right? There's a reason why
It's
books
universal.
like the Bible or the Quran have sustained the test of time because they tell stories, right? There's a reason why people love Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, because there's the story that's built into it.
And I find myself personally just being drawn to overt tales of this. So for men, it's going to be more likely to be this quest and struggle. So, I watch movies like The Matrix or Saving Private Ryan or Lord of the Rings over and over and over again, because they reinforce this very deep primal storytelling. It's the same for women, though. It's just that their stories aren't as overt. I mean, you talk to any woman, and reading Jane Eyre is also a hero's journey. It's just a much more subtle, internalized version of one.
My wife likes to watch 90 Day Fiance. I'm not sure how many heroes there are in that particular program, but
only villains and gold diggers, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's
just kidding.
Yeah, not a lot of value there that I can find. But to your point, we talk about the primal brain. I mean, there's a lot of scientific evidence that shows that there's differences in the male and female brain. So, before you even get started on your marketing or telling people about your podcast, you kind of need to understand who you're speaking to, right?
Absolutely. That's job one. I think most marketers get it completely backwards. They say, hey, we have this great product. All 8 billion people on the planet need to buy it now because it helps everybody. Well, no, that's not true. You have to start with who's your target audience and understand them really well. In fact, you should be using stories very heavily in all of your marketing. But to do that, you have to understand the reaction on your target audience. I have a whole chapter on storytelling in my book, Unleash Your Primal Brain. And one of the things I talk about is know your audience. So I'll give you an example. Here's an objective story, a quick reality. I can record this with a video camera and you can see this. So the Matador stood still in the center of the arena. The bull charged him. He deftly sidestepped and plunged a sword between his shoulder blades from above, striking its heart and bringing it to a stop instantly. Okay, now that's an objective reality. Now, if I tell that story to someone from Spain who loves bullfighting, then the connotation is one of tradition, of discipline, of excellence, of man versus raw nature, right? It's got all these positive connotations. If I tell that to someone from PETA, people from ethical treatment of animals, they're going to say this is barbaric torture and you're subsidizing it by buying tickets to watch this cruelty and it needs to be banned and stopped immediately. It's the same story, but the morals we get from them are going to be different based on who we are. So job one is understand your audience and your tribe and their values, and only then design products and services and messaging and campaigns in order to address them and have the right impact on them.
So that, I mean, props to you, Tim. That's a really powerful juxtaposition there between who your audience is. I guess the next question that I have to kind of follow that up with is, how do you actually determine who your audience is? Because sometimes, and I'll give you an example. My first show, the Awesome Dad Show that I launched, first podcast, was all about celebrating fatherhood. I interviewed celebrities and athletic figures, all talking about how important fatherhood is, because I think it is really important.
Yeah.
But what I found was, when looking at the analytics on Anchor, which is where it's parked now, is that 60% of my listeners were female, which I was like, what? This is so odd. So I'm just kind of wondering, do you have any tactics or ways or any ideas so that we as storytellers, marketers, podcasters can get a clear vision of who we're actually speaking to? Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, well, it's not about audience research. It seems like you're talking more about understanding an audience that you already have or has been attracted to you. But I would say it starts and ends with your own origin myth.
Okay.
Now, yes, if you're a marketer, you can tell a story with your audience as the hero or your potential audience. But another way to attract them is to say, this is my story. Okay. Seems like a really boring thing. I'm helping this business in Australia, and the founder of it is helping tradespeople, like plumbers, electricians, and so on, get mortgages because normally they're non-traditional. They don't have, what do you call it, just their steady paycheck. And so it's hard for them to qualify. But the way she tells it is to say, hey, I work for traditional banks. And I saw how all of these tradespeople were getting the short end of the stick and they were getting screwed and it was taking too long. And, they had problems in their marriages and their businesses because it took so much time just to get a mortgage, right? And so I dug into that. I spent years understanding the banking systems, the hurdles that they faced, and I created my own system just to help tradespeople get mortgages. So yeah, they're in the story, but she's the hero also. Okay. And by saying, I'm now flying the flag, join my crusade. My mission is now to make life easier for people like you. That's also a very compelling origin myth to tell. So sometimes the hero's journey should be applied to creating the origin myth for the podcaster or the marketer because they represent the brand. I mean, what is it about you, Mark, that pulled you into being interested about talking about healthy fatherhood? Well, there's some struggles. There was some unhealthy fatherhood or some lessons you need to learn along the way. And now you want to other fathers or other parents, which is, by the way, why the women are listening, from having to go through the same pain you did. That's your mission. You burn for that. That's your crusade.
And I think that's why we're so attracted to creators like Gary Vaynerchuk. He has this origin story. Immigrant, comes to USA, worked in a liquor store till he was 20, built his dad's liquor store from 3 million to 60 million, walked away with nothing, passed on Uber twice. He tells the same story all the time, but the thing that,
yes.
Yeah.
By the way, we have a similar origin myth. I was also born in the former Soviet Union in Moscow, in fact, and I'm just heartbroken about what's going on in the Ukraine and Russia right now. But yeah, that's the immigrant story. Same thing. Founders of Google, Sergey Brin, right? And the Russian immigrants. It doesn't have to be Russian immigrants, by the way. But the point is, if you think about your own story and what makes it unique, and lean into that.
What do you say to everyone out there that says, hey, Tim, that's great. Gary, Tim, y'all have great stories. My story's not that interesting. I went to high school, I went to college, and that's it. What would you say to someone that says that?
There was a famous journalist, a broadcaster back in the day, Walter Cronkite, and he reported on all the world's important news, and he did a lot of interviews as well. And someone must ask him, what do you do when you have a boring interview subject? And I don't know if you know his mannerisms or his voice, but he has a lot of gravitas. And he thought about it for a couple of seconds and then answered, there are no boring interview subjects. There are only boring interview. And I think he was dead on. If you ask someone about what they're passionate about, you uncover all kinds of stuff. We all have curiosity. We all have a drive. We all have a need to express ourselves in the world. And podcasters are pretty passionate people in my experience. I used to run my own podcast. Here I am on yours. And it's always dynamic people. So the question is, what are you passionate about? That's a question I love to ask people.
Yeah. Yeah. And then maybe even digging deeper into why. Why are you passionate about that? Because probably like you've alluded to, Tim, there's some pain point that occurred at some point. And I think that by going deeper and going vertical into that pain point, you can start to develop your own stories. That's something that I've been borderline obsessed with over the past year or so, is developing a narrative for what I do as a whole. I help podcasters grow their audience and monetize and so on and so forth. But what are the stories that support that narrative along the way that can draw people in?
Yeah. And by the way, like I said, you can have a story, the same story, and it'll have different morals or multiple morals or takeaways, depending on who you're talking to. So one of the things I went through a fantastic speaker training with Heroic Public Speaking, Michael and Amy Port. And one of the things they did was like brainstorming ideas, for your own personal stories. You don't need Gary's story. You have your own story, Mark's story. And so, for example, if I gave you a prompt, like the weirdest time you interacted with a family member, I'm sure you got a story right now. Am I right?
I've been watching a lot of Game of Thrones, so it gets really weird there, but yeah, I digress.
But the point is, if I gave you another prompt, that time you felt stupid as a kid in school.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just making these up. I mean, there are hundreds of prompts, but each of those can create a really vivid little story, which has a moral that you can, shape to whatever purposes you want. And they're authentic and they're coming from you. So again, if you're not interesting, you're not digging deep enough. You are interesting. You have all of these specific life experiences which make you that will resonate for other people. So when we talk about a lot in content marketing, be authentic, right? Well, what does that mean exactly? Well, how about be personal? Because what you have inside of you is generalizable, but it's got to start with a personal story.
Personal story. And I think that, like you said, maybe trying to follow some sort of formula, like the hero's journey, like the origin myth, right? Gives you some sort of structure.
To tell the elevator speech version. And by the way, you should have this rehearsed and you should be fine tuning it and seeing how it acts in the world and what people aren't getting and what they're not understanding and how to make it, what are they reacting to positively or negatively, what, sets them off and triggers them is also good milestone. So, you should have different versions. There's the 2-minute version, there's the 30-second version, and then there's the elevator, 5 to 10-second version. And those are actually even harder to craft. So start with the barf, go with, here's my whole long story with all the details, and then chop down until you get something super tight and distilled. And then
that is really, really good advice. Which, by the way, that's what great writing is. It's write and then cut it in half, and then cut it in half and keep doing that.
Yeah. There's a famous story about Mark Twain. He was asked to give a speech once, and he asked, well, how long does the speech have to be? And they said, well, why does that matter? And he said, well, if it's an hour speech, I'm prepared to give it right now. If it's a 30-minute speech, I'll need a week. And if it's a 5-minute speech, I'll need a month to prepare.
Wow. And it's funny because growing up in school, it's the opposite. It's write, 10 pages and you're like, got to write 10 pages. It's just full of bullcrap, It's funny.
Yeah, so editing is the hard part, and distilling it, and again, getting the nuance, the clarity, and what you want out of that story is somebody saying, "Wow, tell me more." So it's a hook. It doesn't have to tell the whole story. It's the hook,
right?
It's got to be powerful and go, whoa, that's unexpected, or I'll remember that. You want memorability. You don't want, I'm an agency that helps podcasters grow their audience. Okay, there's probably 50 people that do that. Okay, no offense, but what makes Mark unique? Okay, that's a different answer to a different question.
Yeah, well said, well said. And I mean, I'll give you a quick story. I brought on a client who was part of a network. His show was falling flat. We started working together. Within 30 days, he had doubled his audience, and just by not even by doing all that much, right? And it's those types of experiences, I think, that keep people coming back, and by turning that into a story. And that's just a quick elevator pitch. Like, I need to probably refine that and make it better, but I just think that storytelling, when we talk about the primal brain and getting people to remember, you're spot on, Tim. It's not about memorizing an outline of the 5 things that you do. It's about portraying that in a story that helps people avoid the pain and get to the success that they want to be at. Right.
Yeah. And by the way, we're highly cultural creatures, and what stories do for us, the storytelling chapter in my book, that is one of the functions of them is essentially learning from other people's experiences, so we don't have to repeat them. So, hey, if I say, hey, Mark, that path that I just came back down, if you go up that path, there's a bear and he mauled me pretty bad and I had to run away from him. Okay. It's like you being able to hear that story instead of having to go down that path and meet the bear is really, really important. So what stories actually do is they synchronize brains. When someone's telling a story, even in translation or reading it in translation, as long as they have the same common framework I was talking about for the values, they're going to actually sync up with the storyteller's brain with a little bit of delay. So it's literally that Vulcan mind meld like Mr. Spock can do. Telling a story bypasses all the logical filters, all of the defenses, all of that cold cognition stuff, and directly implants experience into someone's brain. That's why storytelling is so powerful. Books, movies, but actually, you know what's even bigger in Hollywood? Games, because we control the story. That's even more powerful. It's interactive and we control it. So games are actually bigger than Hollywood in terms of revenue at this point for that reason.
Certainly not surprising because, oh yeah, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but these games that really suck you in so you feel like you're actually in that universe is really powerful. And it's only getting more powerful and more integrative, which kind of brings me and segues me into something that I kind of wanted to get your opinion on, Tim. I recently got this Oculus Rift, which you can see up here. It's the virtual reality goggles from Facebook or from Meta. Have you tried virtual reality, by the way, Tim? Have you put them on?
I have. I've actually gone into arcades with my kids where you're physically moving around in those goggles and interacting with,
It is a powerful experience. I don't know how to explain it, but you can really feel like you're in a bigger place than you actually are. You know, I mean, how do you see that changing the way, you know, you're on talking about the topic of evolutionary psychology. How do you think these types of experiences are going to change the way that we think, the way that we work? Our brain's I was listening to a little bit of another show of yours. And you're talking about how our brains have grown over time. Our brain's just going to like shrink down into nothingness because we're just getting fed safety all the time. What do you think about this virtual reality?
No, I think that so this is just my own personal judgment, but you know, basically the way to think about evolutionary psychology is we're frozen in time. Okay, we're not evolving. I mean, over the course of this lifetime or on the time scale of the the looming climate extinction crisis. I mean, we have what we have to work with. If we survive that, then you got all these augmentation things that are going to eventually happen. We're going to hook sensors directly into our bodies instead of wearing them. There might be some kind of hive mind collective where we're more directly mind meld. Noah Yuval Harari wrote a book, Homo Deus, after his excellent book Sapiens, and he's talking about kind of like where essentially biological evolution's come to an end. Now we're kind of upgrading and bootstrapping and growth hacking our way to being a new kind of species. I have no idea where that's going, but that's not human anymore.
We're turning into like cyborgs, right? With Elon Musk and the Neuralink and stuff like that.
Yeah, maybe I'm old fashioned. I'll be one of the last generations of the naturals or the vaginals, you know, because you were born out of a vagina, you know. Like in the future, that probably won't be the case.
Oh gosh, now you're getting crazy test tube babies and stuff. I would, which I mean, listen, I'm obsessed.
I've read too much science fiction back in the day, I guess.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it's honestly, I mean, humans, I mean, we have this need to continue to improve and innovate and make things better. So I really don't think it's that far off by any means. I do want to talk. One of the things I really want, so we're running low on time here, Tim. One of the things I really want to talk to you a little bit about was social media and how different social media platforms impact the psychology of the user. Because somebody's on Instagram, they want a certain thing. They're on YouTube, they're looking for something different. Podcast, book, etc. Like, do you change the way that you communicate, or should we change the way that we communicate based on the different platforms that we're on?
Well, absolutely. You shouldn't have a visual component if it's a podcast. Yours is also out on video and it's audio only, but it's a different experience. So you should always adapt to the medium you're using, no question, but also to the audience, because the audience on Twitter, in terms of who they are and their attention span, is very different than the audience for a podcast, for example. So there's an attention span difference, there's an engagement difference, and a demographic and psychographic audience difference. So you should always be as aware as you can of the audience and the medium you're using to communicate with them.
I definitely agree with that. And, you know, the reason that's actually top of mind is we got a question from one of the Podcast Savant Mastermind members, part of my paid community. Shout out to you all. You're awesome action takers. Love you. But one of the questions was, how can we run ads to get more traffic to our podcast? And so what I did at that time was I reached out to dozens of podcasters that I know in the industry. And I said, hey, what are you doing? What's working for you? What do you think is effective? And a number of them responded that I like to run, you know, I would or run TikTok ads or Instagram story ads, which are short. I mean, we're talking 15 seconds at most. To
Right.
me, that's a completely different mindset than someone sitting down and saying, I want to listen to a 30 or 45 or hour long podcast about a topic.
Yeah. Yeah. And also how shareable is it? For example, my buddy Dharmesh Shah, he was one of the founders of HubSpot, the CTO, and what they found is like there's blog posts, and blog posts were shared. But what they did is they started having like these tweetable little call out quotes that you can just click to tweet it. Right. And those got 10x the share rate of the full blog article, but it linked back to that article. So if you have to figure out what's the bite-sized chunk, what's the little unit, how do I lower the threshold for that getting shared? How would I make it really easy to share stuff? So absolutely. I mean, 10, 15 second TikTok stuff can be just as effective, but you have to, again, design for that medium. It's not a long form thing. So you might have to go do an edit through this podcast and find a little 10-second nugget that you're going to share. It takes a little extra work.
The only thought that I had, the concern that I have on this topic, it's something I've been kind of disillusioned with, is this clickbait type of mentality, this like fear porn that you're seeing manifest all across the web. Like I feel like I need to fight that. But when the algorithm is pushing that out to more people and you're getting those 10x returns, it's pretty compelling. It's pretty hard to say I'm not going to do that just because of, whatever reason that you've got.
Yeah. And the thing you have to understand is also the overall environment. We're bombarded with information all the time. It's only getting worse. And there's like signal to noise ratio has really gone down. It's mostly noise, right? So stuff that's going to cut through is going to be really, really compelling. Or I do think there's a backlash, and podcasts fit into it in the following way. I think there's people are self-selecting and they want their silence and they want to invite you in. So whether you get a newsletter or whether you subscribe to a podcast, that's a really high level of trust in Seth Godin's terms. It's permission marketing. You have the right to invade my privacy. And given, again, how much is impinging on it, that's a very high level of safety and trust I've extended to you. So that's where you ultimately want to get to. So you're not competing with the great unwashed and all of those other marketing messages.
I actually am glad you said that, Tim, because that is one of the reasons I think that podcasting is so important, because you're being invited in, and you're being invited in not just for a 15-second handshake. You're being invited in for some serious thought-provoking conversation, which I don't know that there's anything else out there that's quite like that. I mean, historically, I think there was books. You could read books. YouTube serves that purpose as well. I think public speaking to an extent, but I don't know. I think podcasting is just such an important way to break through the noise and be invited in. I love how you put that too. Really good.
Yeah. 100%.
So Tim, before I let you go here, what's one mistake or one thing that anyone who's marketing and trying to put their voice out there, what's one thing that we should not do that you see done a lot? Give me one thing.
Being too broad in terms of your brand, saying, yeah, everybody in the world needs what I have. It may technically be true, but you can't own the everything in the world spot in anybody's mind. So I think that the antidote to that is go hyper focus. Start with the point of the spear and then expand your audience from there, or maybe even jump to different micro audiences instead of trying to build a broad based anything. Focus. That's if I had to leave it with one word.
Yeah, you're not for everybody, but you are for some people. And listen, Tim, it's been a pleasure. You got to check out timash.com, timash.com. It's just like it sounds. It's not complicated, but you definitely go to timash.com. There's some great resources there. And Tim, I just appreciate you really helping us break down psychologically how we can reach, connect, and spread our message more powerfully. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, my pleasure. So yeah, if you want to know more about my consulting services, that's on timash.com. If you want to get a free chapter of my new book, the chapter of your choice, just go to primalbrain.com/book.
Primal Brain. Are you playing with NFTs at all, by the way, Tim? I don't want to go too off topic, but have you?
I'm not. I guess I'm one of those Gen Xers, and I'm too old of a dog to learn that new trick.
We'll see. I think especially when it comes to the book space, the authorship, I feel like NFTs are going to really change the way that things work. But yeah, the book is Unleash Your Primal Brain. The website's timash.com.
Timash or primalbrain.com. Yep.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. I know you're walking away with some great tips. I know I did. Go ahead and hit subscribe, and we will catch you here in the next episode. Stick around. It's going to be awesome. See ya. Peace.